G'day folks. Today I'm going to explain to you why I don't believe any Australian needs to complete the census and why completing the census is completely voluntary and why you cannot be fined for not completing the census. I'm going to use the 2016 Australian census as the example from which I'm going to draw the evidence, and I hope that by the end you'll see that they can't touch you if you don't want to do the census. So, in the build-up to the 2016 census, we were told that it was compulsory and everyone had to do it. But there was one gentleman who disagreed with that point of view. His name was Bill McClellan, and what makes his position of note is that he's a former chief statistician at the Bureau of Statistics, who I believe was there in the 80s and 90s. And he said that the census was not compulsory. And now, to be clear, he was speaking in terms of legal technicalities. And what he was saying was that on a legal technicality, the census is not compulsory. But he felt you could still be fined for not completing it. Now, I think that Bill McClellan is both correct and incorrect. And I'm going to explain why the census is compulsory as a statement that is extremely deceptive. And the deception is based on your assumption and presumption. But before I do that, I'm just going to explain to you why, in a legal sense, you don't need to complete the census. So when the census form comes to you, it comes either in the mail or is delivered. Whichever way it comes, it's addressed to someone. And that someone is not you. It's addressed to the resident. And that's not your name. So what do you do with mail that comes to you that's not addressed to your name? Well, you return it to sender. And that's what you should do. When the census form turns up in the letterbox, if it's addressed to the resident, you should write return to sender on the envelope and put it back in the mail. They'll send you more. They won't give up that easily. You'll get a couple more, but they'll all be addressed to the resident. And on each and every envelope that comes addressed to the resident, you should write the words return to sender and pop it back in the mail. Now, at some point, you'll also receive a visit from a census collector, and they'll have a form with them, and they'll ask you if you're going to complete the census. So you should, without taking the form, you should probably also just put your hands behind your back. You should ask the census collector to show you the front page of the census form. And when he does, you'll note that it's addressed to the resident. So once you've seen that, you should simply say, that's not addressed to me, so I cannot receive it. And now he'll probably, at that point, he or she will probably make a number of threats that he's been pre-programmed to make by his trainers. You'll be fined, that'll be deemed a refusal, yada, yada, yada. Don't get engaged in a conversation with him. Or her, that they don't know any more about the census than you do. So just say, I'm sorry, that's not addressed to me, so I cannot receive it. And then say, I'm going inside now, have a good day, goodbye. And walk inside and close the door. You don't owe them an explanation, you don't owe them anything. They're no different than a door-to-door salesman. You don't have to speak to them, and you don't have to explain what you're doing. And the fact is, you've already explained what you're doing. The reason that you're not doing the census is because it hasn't been addressed to you. You explained that. You've already given him everything he needs to know. That's not addressed to me, I cannot receive it. That's the full, complete explanation. And it's just that simple, folks. Return to sender, return to sender, return to sender. I cannot receive it, I cannot receive it, I cannot receive it. Because you are not to the resident. So, moving on now to the statement, the census is compulsory, which appears on the front of the census form, which I'll just pull up. The census is compulsory. The information is collected under the authority of the Census and Statistics Act 1905. Penalties, note this word, may apply if you do not complete the census when directed. Anything may happen. Anything may happen. You may get hit by a bus later today, but it's probably not likely. But going to the statement that census is compulsory, what I want to suggest to you is that when you read that, you make a couple of assumptions. The first assumption is you believe that it's compulsory for you. The second assumption you make is that you believe you have to complete it. So the who is it compulsory for? You assume is you, and the what is compulsory? Completing the census form. I'm going to point out to you why I believe that is a complete deception. So let's go to the Census and Statistics Act of 1905, and I'm going to first read from the Principal Act, which was the Act as it was written in 1904 and passed into law in 1905. And this is what it says. So in the Principal Census and Statistics Act 1905, it states in Part 3, Section 9, "It shall be the duty of the statistician, subject to the regulations and to the directions of the Minister, to prepare and issue forms and instructions and take all necessary steps for the taking and collection of the census." I'm going to reread that again, and this time I'm going to emphasise a couple of words. It shall be the duty of the statistician to prepare and issue forms and instructions and take all necessary steps for the taking and collection of the census. So what I'm suggesting to you that is the deception is that when they say the census is compulsory, it's a true statement in law. It is compulsory, but it's compulsory for the chief statistician and for the Bureau of Statistics, because that's the job they took. When they signed their employment contract, I mean, if you sign an employment contract to be the chief statistician at the Bureau of Statistics, you've probably got to assume that you've just entered a binding agreement to conduct the census. Now, I'm just going to give you the wording from the most recent amended edition of the Census and Statistics Act. They've moderated the wording, probably because they thought putting the word duty, made it a bit too clear for people who actually looked into it as to who it was compulsory for. So they've changed the language over the years to make it a little more subtle, but you'll see that it's still there. So the Census and Statistics Act 1905, as amended, states in Part 2, Section 8.3, "For the purposes of the taking of the census, the statistician shall collect statistical information in relation to the matters prescribed for the purposes of this section." So I'll read it again, emphasising a couple of words. For the purposes of the taking of the census. Actually, I'll read that bit again. For the purposes of the taking of the census, the statistician shall collect statistical information in relation to the matters prescribed for the purposes of this section. So what am I suggesting? I'm suggesting that taking the census is compulsory, not completing the form, and I'm suggesting it's compulsory for the statistician and probably the staff at the Bureau of Statistics, probably the relevant minister whose portfolio this comes under, and probably the government, because they pass the law and keep it on the books that says they must do a census every 5 years. But that doesn't make it compulsory for you. And I'll just give you here a maximum of law that is relevant. Fraud lies hid in general expressions. And what it's saying is, with respect to the statement, the census is compulsory, which I'm suggesting is a general expression, is that the fraud is in what you presume and assume about it. Because it's clear that even in the manner which you would have presumed it was compulsory for you, it should be clear to you that it's not compulsory for everyone. Because if you live in a house with 4 or 5 people, only one of you would complete the census anyway. So it's clear that the statement, the census is compulsory, is extremely broad and doesn't apply in every circumstance. It doesn't have universal application. Just a couple other things I wanted to touch on. The signature box. Normally when you sign something, there's a declaration. If you sign a tax return, you say, "I declare that the information in this return is true and correct." But here there's no declaration. At question 61, they say, "Finished? Question mark. Please check that the answers to question 60 accurately reflect the view where known." Where known? That's hardly binding, is it? Did you know? No, I didn't know. Okay, well then no worries. We don't have to worry about that. Of each person in the household. That was the question 60 was, can we reveal all their data in 100 years' time? Publicly. Can we make it public? Please make sure you have not missed any pages or questions. That's not a declaration. Please sign here. That's not a declaration. And then you sign it. And they say, thank you for your participation. Well, only volunteers participate. You don't participate when something's compulsory. You don't have a choice. You're not a participant when something's compulsory. You're conscripted. So I wouldn't be signing. I think that's quite troubling, that, because to me it's like signing a blank cheque. It's like entering into a contract where you don't know what the terms and conditions are. They haven't told you what your signature on that form means. It's like signing a blank cheque. I wouldn't be comfortable doing it if I were you. So, just a couple of other things. A lot of people might be saying, well, that's all well and good, mate, but it's just a census. Who cares? Well, I'd like to suggest to you that you should care, because they didn't come to you and say, would you voluntarily assist us in collecting this information so we can do a better job of running the country? They've come to you and attempted to have you believe that you must do it and you have no choice in the matter. And in order to coerce you into complying, they have a rather large fine sitting behind the whole thing. So the fine for not doing the census is $185 per day, which is over $60,000 per annum, a substantial amount. And supposedly it keeps running ad infinitum until you give them the information they want. So it's $60,000 per annum forever. Why is the fine so ludicrously big? Well, because if you ask any poker player, when you're bluffing, you've got to bluff big. If you don't bluff big, you won't scare the other players out of the game. They won't fold their hands if you just bluff small. So it's just that simple. When you see a fine that big over something like the census, you've got to say, why such a crazy large fine? Why such a big threat? Because it's a bluff, and they know it's a bluff, and they're trying to coerce you. They're trying to get you to fold your hand. So, in summary, folks, I hope that helps. This is a shortened version of what I originally prepared. My original version went for over an hour and a half. It's got a lot more information. It explains to you why you're not the resident, even if you think you are. It goes into a lot more detail, but someone suggested to me it was too much. So this is the condensed version. If you'd like to see the longer version, put it in the comments that you'd like to see it, and if there's enough people who comment that they want to see the longer version, I'll try and upload it. Okay, hope that helps, folks. Why is it important? One other thing. What if somewhere in the future they tell you something else is compulsory? Say, for example, we end up in a war and they reintroduce conscription, and they say that's compulsory. And if you don't agree to conscription, then you go to jail. Would it be useful to you for you to know that that word compulsory has been used deceptively in the past, and that perhaps there's a legal means by which you don't have to accept conscription and you also don't need to go to jail? Alright, this also leads into decoding the matrix in terms of, it's probably the simplest one for me to explain. I'm going to go into the Australian Taxation Office, the Income Tax Assessment Act, and a whole lot of other things. But this is once you start to see that they're deceptive, and I think it's pretty clear in this one, then you'll see deceptions elsewhere, and you'll be open to the idea that they are deceiving you all the time. They stay within the bounds of the law, but they're deceptive at all points. Okay, alright, that's it. See you, folks.